What's up everyone, this is Cher talking, welcome back to my channel. On today's video, I'll be making a full review for the SaGa Soul Sirius banner that brings Sirius, buffer, debuffer, healer, and many other things. Maka, a slash damage dealer, and Sinon, a new type of debuffer to amplify damage. Well, we start talking about Sirius. He gives the name to the banner. He is a tank, but also multi-purpose buffer debuffer. So it's good to have 100% will and 100% endurance to reduce damage taken. STR is at 110%, that's just okay. And we have 89% agility. That could have been high 1 year ago, but now the current game asks for at least or close to 100% agility to be able to attack before the current bosses. Other status won't matter as much. So moving on, Sirius on start of turn will be buffing STR and intelligence by 15% of the whole squad. So that also comes well with Matriarch since she buffs STR intelligence, endurance, and will. You will also enter a taunt stance that has medium effect, lasts for 4 turns and recover 2 BP. The medium effect stacks and it will eventually reach max potential, and you will likely to get attacked by single target attacks. It is still not as good as Julian's taunt since he also applies stealth to all other surviving allies. Now, after activating skill 2, we'll be talking about this right now. Skill 2 is a support skill that uses 7 BP. Sirius has 5, meaning that he cannot use it every turn unless you have BP generation. And it grants guard up large that decreases damage taken by 35% and lasts for 3 turns. This does not stack, so you cannot use it one after another to keep increasing. And it also grants his end of turn recover HP by around 250 that will last for 3 turns, and this one do stack. If you want to keep using this skill, you get the extra HP heal, but the guard up will always last for 3 turns, accounting for the turn where you cast. So defense boost skills like Liz and even Enias are fast now because you want them to go before the enemy attacks. If you keep using guard up large, it's okay because you'll just be refreshing, but the first time you cast may not be fast enough. Now, when you use this skill, you have 2 other effects. Those are actually amazing for the cost. You will then remove all buffs enemies use it and remove debuffs applied to the party for all status. So if a boss keeps buffing itself to reach very high status, you stop that. And if the enemy keeps debuffing you every turn, or well, maybe in some turns, you then stop that as well. The problem here is, if a boss buffs all status when it attacks, for example, or on start of turn, it will already be too fast, and Sirius will likely not be fast enough. One example is the Firebringer fight, where Sirius will try to buff break Firebringer to not avail. Firebringer will go first, you do high damage, and then you'll be able to buff break. So it works, but not to the extent that we need it. But for 7 VP, guard up decreasing damage taken by 35. Buff break, buff cleans, and also the very small healing is already good enough, not accounting for the remaining abilities of Sirius. Sirius will also counterattack when being directly attacked with a skill called Super Tail Cutter. That's skill number 3. That is a double S power attack that is also fast, but on counter it doesn't matter. Deals just slash type of damage. It's critical versus all spirits and demons. When the attack lands, it will grant the enemy defense down and defense down spell that decreases damage taken by 15% on rank 1 or 20% on rank max. Since this will be triggered via passive, it will be just 15% for each effect, and they last for 2 turns, meaning that if you get to counter multiple times, you just keep stacking since these effects are stackable. You'll be increasing the damage of skills and even more if you are using spells. And when you use this skill either as a command or as a counter, you also trigger a HP recover for the whole squad of very small effect, healing at least 250 to the party. So it's more of a defensive counter than really damage. The serious selling point is Prince Majesty, the second passive that is loaded with many different effects. You have 4 different triggers, but 2 can happen at once. When you are attacked by skills, Sirius will then debuff all enemies STR by 5%. 5% Yes, even if it says it's medium because it hits all enemies, it has lower value. You will then also buff all surviving allies' endurance by 15%. As you can see, it goes both ways, decreasing the enemy STR on the source and buffing your all allies' endurance to decrease damage taken, but this only happens for the next attack. If that skill is then a direct attack, you will also debuff all enemies' agility by 5%, and then buff all surviving allies' love by 15%. So you are also decreasing a secondary status from the enemy. Agility will help if the enemy is using MR's attacks, because those need both STR and agility to do damage. And love will help with all healing effects. Sirius is also a healer somehow, so you can get better and better healings. But if the attack is indirect, then Sirius will choose to debuff dexterity instead of agility by 5%, and buff all surviving allies charisma by 15%. This doesn't matter much if you are buffing love or if you are buffing charisma, you will still increase your healing effects. But dexterity makes more sense for indirect attacks since it's the main attribute for bow and gun skills from enemies. So you are likely to decrease damage taken from most fronts. But now, if you are then attacked by a spell attack, you debuff the enemy's intelligence by 5%, and then buff all surviving allies' will by 15%. This is the best case scenario, I believe, and the most important thing, because when you are buffing your will, you are decreasing the chance of being inflicted with debuffs, but also ailments, and ailments can make you lose a fight. If you are running for 30 turns and then an enemy applies paralyze and someone dies, it's hard to revive that person because it will lose all buffs applied to that point. And all spells are also indirect. That means that you will then also debuff the enemy's dexterity and also buff your own charisma to increase your healing effects. And if the enemy has a mix of intelligence and dexterity based attacks, you will still be decreasing for both. So there are plenty of different situations, and depending on boss behavior and skill options, Sirius will trigger many different results. But the thing is, debuff values are not good enough. If there's just one enemy, decreasing the main attribute by 5% with each time Sirius is hit, it takes too much time for it to matter. Especially because most bosses are removing debuffs either by the end of turn or by checking a certain amount of debuff. Those will likely not happen with Sirius, but by the end of turn, everything's gone. And that's why we are bringing debuffers that are fast, that can debuff the enemy before the enemy can even attack. If the enemy is attacking and Sirius is your only debuffer, you're not going to survive. I don't think Sirius is a good debuffer at all, to be honest. He's more like a secondary one, and he's more of a buffer when you are allowed to buff. If the enemy does not remove your buffs every turn, if it removes every 2 turns, it can still have some value, because especially will helps too much in this game. Not much about endurance though, but love and charisma effects can also help you recover because Sirius can be your main healer. But now that we know that he can do this, we have to discuss the applicability of this when compared to other types of tanks. Sirius also decreases damage taken by 50% at all times, so, well, he can tank. But I want to talk about Princess White Rose, Global X style. I'm Princess Pumpkin. Remember this one? She was such an essential character to clearing content in Global because she would buff all surviving alliance will when she was hit. I miss those days when we only had one effect in a passive, but back then we could stack this for all 4 turns and have insane amounts of will. Game design has changed so much since then that even saying that you buff way too many stuff on the same turn may not be enough. Sirius can still fail to help you if he is not buff breaking the enemy before the enemy attack. He's not debuffing the enemy before the enemy attack. Hence why sometimes someone like Esper can still help you enough via her witch trick that guarantees a 15% debuff and guarantees enemies buff break. So while you have lots of different effects, will they last? He can also compare to Julian somehow, because Julian is a tank and he has the best type of taunt. because he then gives down to himself, but stealth to all other surviving allies, and he's ready by turn 2 with the highest potential. Remember that Julian buffs STR for everyone when he's hit. That's an offensive status. And we can use him together with people like Ihachi or the damage dealers to do more damage faster. He also stacks lots of attack boost. His damage is much higher than Sirius that needs to actually help someone else do more damage. When he is attacking, he also buffs Endurance, defensive stat, and he also gets defense boost. So he can survive almost forever, and he's used in lots of hard challenges. Julian and Sirius clash. They could be used in a fight where the enemy always uses just AoE. Okay, but if it has any sort of single target attack, you usually prefer Julian to counter than Sirius. And Julian is the best counter in the game, seconded by UniverSe latest style, because he has similar setup. He buffs STR and Dexterity when he's landing on attacks, while Sirius can only buff once per turn STR and Intelligence. While Julian can buff many times, and UniverSe can buff once or twice. He will buff by use of counter as well. And UniverSe can buff every time that he attacks. He can counter twice, so that is already double buffing STR and Dexterity. But sometimes if he counters even more, and you can buff, you reach very high potential. And he is an AoE specialist, and Julian is more as a single target one. Both work in content where they need to counter though. But Sirius is more of a support tank that can help other people work, especially mages if possible. But some part of his design is a little complicated to benefit. If Sirius was released some time ago, whoa, that would be extremely OP and broken. But right now, if a boss does not allow you to keep your buffs every turn, and if a boss is too fast, we are losing part of the potential of Sirius. Skill number 1 is Healing Light Blade. That's a single target attack, this time with Slash and Sun, that will recover all surviving allies' HP by around 250. Yet another source of healing. And we already discussed the second and third skills. The BP generation here is 5, so you either choose to use Super Tail Cutter and Healing Light Blade if you don't have any extra BP generation, or you go for Light Wall, and when you don't have BP, use Healing Light Blade. This is the main cycle. But Sirius will help more passively when being hit, helping the party achieve high status and protection if you are allowed to do so. You are not allowed to do so. If you need to buff break, Sirius may not be your best bet. But there's no problem. You can use Sirius just as a counter character. You have people like Esper. Many people will have Espers with Trick. That's a skill that guarantees to debuff at least 15% status from the enemies, and will guarantee also to buff break the enemy. So Sirius can focus more on trying to be a counter that will increase spell damage, especially because Esper already deals a lot of damage with her newest style. So you counter with defense down and defense down spell. The only problem is that then a boss has to have a hybrid design where it has some direct attacks to allow Sirius to counter, while still being a boss that you need to protect yourself with buffing will. See that it does happen a lot. Many bosses have hybrid design. They will be using skills and spells and still using direct attacks, and in those case scenarios, Sirius will shine. If you can take the benefit of being there as a counter, buffing status, and then healing the party, and sometimes just occasionally use Light Wall. You don't need to just keep using this every turn, since, like I said, there are some problems with this skill. It's not the best type of buff break, but it's also an AoE one. And we also don't have many characters that have debuff cleans. So with few options, we are left with a character that has way too much, but it's probably never the better one in anything that he does. But he is almost like too many roles condensed into a single character. So you will be able to use him, especially if you are a new player, condensing a lot of different types of utilities. But if you are a veteran, you can see that while he is very good, you can skip him, because you are already clearing content with what you have. And you can see that buffs are easy to find now, and counters are stronger somewhere else, with his main selling point being the passive buff and debuff that may not always work. Hence why I believe Sirius is a very good character that would receive an OP grade as a generalist, but will receive a 4.5 out of 5 by not being exactly so easy to apply or having reached high potential on what exactly he does. The next character is Maka, and we have here 130% STR. That's a very high number. He's a damage dealer, has 82% endurance and 89% will. This is a good value for a damage dealer as well, with extremely high agility, 115%. Why don't you give this to Sirius? Okay, moving on, we start the fight with 13 BP, and when attacking we get 2 extra. This is nice because she has chase, and when she's attacking, she will always chase with this first skill called Drown Sword. You can see Drown Sword as a skill that buffs attack boost by 15% on rank 1 or 20% on max rank. It will also buff STR by 15% on rank 1 or 25% on max rank. We have the skill to use as the first one, so you already have it, and then if you are attacking, you still have another 50% chance to trigger an extra chase called Cherry Blossom Brilliance. This is an amazing skill. That's the third one. Single target, 3 hits of 8 power. Remember Triple Crush with Gustav? We are back to that. So when you are also using this skill, you will then buff all of your status by 35%, then you get a 50% attack boost and a 25% defense boost. Those boosts last for 3 turns, and they can stack with themselves. And if you use Cherry Blossom Brilliance as your main command, you will already buff all your status by 35. You already get this attack boost, this defense boost, to reach very good damage potential and sustain. But you don't know if you are going to chase as much as you want to keep stacking those status, attacks, and defense boosts. It's still RNG, but it's also very nice when it works, and Maka can stack so much to reach very high potential. Not as much as Ihachi, for example, but she breaks Urpina without having to use overdrive, and she can last for the whole fight, and will do more slash damage than Merlot-Syrah human form. Then, when being attacked, we always reduce damage taken by 30% and have 25% chance to evade. Then we have another 30% damage reduction and 30% damage increase. So 30% damage increase is the only damage passive, hence why Maka starts slow. But you have 2 damage reduction of 30%, and you have the defense boost that will always trigger when you use Cherry Blossom Brilliance, meaning that you can even use Maka on the center of a Rising King formation, for example, to get extra STR buff and take damage for very high sustain. Now, skill 1, we discussed it, just like we discussed skill 3. Let's discuss skill 2. Bewitched Blade is a single target slash attack that is also critical to human, triple S powered 10 BP. And it will recover the user HP by 1,500 and will also grant an attack boost of 20% increase when you level this to max. It lasts for 3 turns, and this will always stack with the other sources of attack boost. But now, how do we use Maka? We want to start with Cherry Blossom Brilliance because this is the strongest attack and will trigger all status buffs and the attack and defense boost you want it. And she will still chase with Drown Sword at least, and sometimes chasing again with Cherry Blossom Brilliance that will trigger all status buffs again, the attack and defense boost once more. This only has a 50% chance to trigger though, you have to remember that, it won't happen all the time. When you double chase, you will get back 6 BP, when you just chase once, you get back just 4. Aligned with 3 that you get by the end of a turn, you get back either 7 or 9. I can tell you that if you get Cherry Blossom Brilliance, if you don't have any external BP generation, you can even choose to use a normal attack in the second turn, for example, to save BP and have enough for Cherry Blossom Brilliance yet again on turn 3. But if you do get a chase, you can use Drown Sword just fine, or if you have external sources of BP generation. With all those attack boosts stacking, alongside many status buffs, if they are allowed to stay, because some bosses will remove your buffs anyway, Maka will reach very high damage potential, and if she needs to heal, you can use Bewitched Blade. That is still okay, since it gives you an attack boost. Maka will just start to build up to do a lot of damage. She may not have the explosive damage of Kihachi or even the opener as Arpina that has very high potential, but on long fights Maka works. The problem here is that it's just slash damage, and we will see more and more characters capable of doing slash damage, and she's also a sword user. You already have way too many sword users that are strong. If you collected Kihachi, you are good to go. And if you have Kihachi and Arpina or Kihachi and Merlot-Syrah, you are also good to go. You don't need that many slash attackers. Sadly, that's true. Maka has some inheritances. Vertical slash is a column attack with just slash damage. But before attacking, you buff your STR by 25% on max level and then launches an attack with double S power. So she can use this for farming if the enemies are aligned in a column. That doesn't happen much often. Then we have Acceleration Sword. This time is slash and pierce, and it's for a row of enemies, and you buff your STR after the attack by 25%. So this can also work sometimes as a farming, but Maka does not open with good passive. She only has 30%, remember? So she may fail. And the third one is an AoE attack that can debuff agility and intelligence of the enemies by 15%, but well, I don't think she is a debuffer with 32% intelligence, so just forget about this. Maka is good, she is strong. Sadly, I don't recommend pulling for her. As a damage dealer right now, I would say that she is a 4 out of 5, but for the future of the game, she will be easily forgotten for damage dealers that can also offer something else to the party. So even if she has a high grade, I don't recommend pulling for. The last character will be Sinon, and Sinon is a S-Sword user with just 113 dexterity. Could have been higher. 82% endurance, but 100% will. This is a good value. And 92% agility, that could also be higher since Sinon is also some type of debuffer to amplify damage. And starting we have a passive that will trigger all other surviving allies healing when he is attacking, but not himself. He'll also recover 2 extra BP. When he attacks on overdrive, he will then use this Echo Noise. Echo Noise is related to the skill number 2, Serenade of Swords. When you use this skill that costs 8 BP and has just S power, you can also apply this Echo Noise. So, you have it as an effect via skill or via an overdrive attack. But what exactly is Echo Noise? This is like Sundered, but a little more restricted. If you remember, well, Sundered is an effect that you can find on characters like Matcha in her refractory style with SaGa Magical Train, Sundered for 2 turns, or people like Creator that has it with his Creator's Flare that has Sundered for just 1 turn, or from his Halloween style, Sundered for 2 turns. In the case of Sinon, we have it only for 1 turn, and it's restricted to certain elemental types. Here, when you attack the enemy with a Pierce attack, it will then grant a Pierce defense down, decreasing the defense by 10%. If it's a Cold attack, it would then grant a Cold defense down, decreasing Cold defense by 10%. If it's a Shadow attack, it would then grant a Shadow defense down, decreasing the defense by 10%. Okay, so it's an inferior Sundered effect already. The only way this succeeds Sundered if you are using a skill that has 2 of these elements. For example, Swift benefits a lot from this, because Swift attacks multiple times between 4 to 9 with the Heavenly Fox Trails, and he can even stack many chases of this attack, and the attack it's both Pierce and Cold, meaning that every time you use 1 hit, you decrease both defenses to 10%, and the game will apply that 2 times. I mean, it will be 10% and then 10%, increasing your damage by double instead of just 1 trigger. So Swift benefits a lot, and some other people will benefit, like Pamela. Pamela has Pierce and Shadow attacks, and they are from the same game, but she's on a different banner. But, I don't know, Sinon has more to offer besides this, because this can be used for very fast setups to increase damage taken by the enemy, but we already have Sundered, that works. This is sometimes better, because we can, for example, reach overdrive and then use the skill number 2, that is fast. And then you have 2 stacks already, and then Swift will get 4 stacks because of this combination, but only on overdrive. Since he likes to reach overdrive fast, he also gets 25 points of overdrive gauge by the end of turn. Then on start of turn, when all allies are still surviving, he grants 1 random surviving ally, can be any, even himself, 2 damage blocks for 1 turn. Just that turn, it will not stack. And then 1 random surviving ally HP healing of 1,500. And then 1 random surviving ally 3 BP. You don't know who's gonna get this, so it's not reliable, and it really doesn't help much. Because let's say you get a damage block for someone that's not attacked, and it lasts just for that turn. And, well, the BP generation may be useful, but sometimes you give it to someone that does not need. Also, when attacking, he reduces damage taken by 30% at all times, and by the end of a turn gets the HP healing by around 250, because he doesn't get when he is attacking the enemies. Okay, Sinon is not a multi-hit attacker, so you always have 5 VP. So we have to think about that when discussing the skills. First one is Skilled Stab, the same one as Swift, and it has the power buffs dexterity by 30% on max level. It's okay, but where are the damage passives? 0. Sinon has no damage. The second skill is the one that we already discussed, that you will be using to increase damage taken off someone else, because Sinon barely loses damage anyway. But at least this skill has Pierce and Cold. But he uses this first, meaning that you would not get much. At least Echo Noise is applied first, so you get at least 1 stack of each. And then we have Song of Homeland. That's a support skill that will be used for all allies, can only be used once per battle. It should have been at least 2 times. And it grants all surviving allies damage block for 2 times with no turn limit. You have to use 8 BP, it's not really a problem, to be honest. But 2 damage blocks is not important. We even use Empress for 2 turns of full damage negation, and damage block for 2 times may not even survive for 1 turn, depending on the situation. He does have this 10% chance to restore the usage of Song of Homeland, but really doesn't make sense, because 10% is a very low chance to use a character for it. And Sinon doesn't have any other type of party support besides Song of Homeland for defense. He only has Echo Noise for offense. Now, for inheritance, we have Ice Impact. This is a skill that was used by the Ashes Word version of Katarina, that can heal once or 2 times with an AoE attack and depowered. I don't think Sinon is a good healer anyway, but this could help you if you don't have any other source of healing for Ashes Words. Droplet's an emergency button for revive and recover. And we have Fantasy Lullaby, that's a blunt attack with Ashes Words that can apply sleep and will debuff. But those things are really not useful at all right now, because we can debuff will by much higher with real debuffers, and sleep's not used on remembrance fights, for example. Forget about inheritance, they can be panic buttons, but they don't make the character essentially better. Sinon is there just for fast clears and for those that have really nothing else to use on remembrance. He is a very weak character that needs other damage dealers with the right elements to even shine. A 0 to 5 grade system, I'll give Sinon only a 2.5, because it's really easy to skip and does not offer much, and would not help even new players, to be honest. With all that said, none of these characters have future styles on JP so far, because they come from Emperor SaGa, a game that is not running anymore, and because of that, it's pretty unlikely to see other versions in the near future. But here we have kinda of a problem. Sirius is very useful, although not the best on what he does. He just does a lot. Maka is a damage dealer with high potential, but has RNG and is just a slash. I'll be giving this banner just a silver award because of Sirius and Maka being useful, but I still really think it's a skippable banner for many people that want to save gens to see what's coming. And even those that want to pull here because they like the characters, I would suggest you to wait before you decide. Next banners may be better, and you don't really have a need for those characters, it's better to wait. With all that said, this is my opinion. I'll be skipping. What is yours? Please say here in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't, and I hope to see you soon on the next video or live stream. Bye.